What's up, Internet? It is that time of year once again, the time where you have waited 365 days to see what some guy has said about video games on an easily digestible list of information. Because people really like those for some reason. It is my top 10 games of 2022, the 10 best games I have played this year. If you're looking for something to play, try hunting these down. But before we begin, of course, I have some honorable mentions. This year I have 3, and I have to say it was a really tough year for best games. I have played so many really good ones. By February, I had like 4 games of the year already set up, and I even joked that this was not going to be like the 10 best games of the year, but like the 10 top 1 games of the year. So seriously, grab these games, they're good. Honorable mention number A goes to Guilty Gear Strive, a game I absolutely want to put on this list and sink a lot more time into, but there are 2 big issues with it that are preventing me from doing so. Issue number the first is the fact that it has no real accessibility. And I've said this before a bunch of times, I'll say it again. I have muscle control issues with my hands. Stuff like fighting games are actually really hard for me, to the point where from 1996 to 2012, I gave up on them entirely, thinking I hated them. Well, it turns out I actually love fighting games. I just hated playing a completely different game than the person who was beating me up every single time. Because they had all these crazy moves, and I had punch, kick, and if I was lucky, jump. Yeah, it was an absolute slaughter. Accessibility is a big thing in these games, and when I find a fighting game that actually has these, it is a godsend because it means I can actually enjoy it like anyone else. But when a fighting game actually is very difficult to get into and play the characters, it's significantly more difficult for me to actually enjoy because, like I said, I'm basically playing a completely different game than anyone else, even the CPU opponents. The accessibility for me was so hard that my brother actually challenged me to get a single combo that took off one static NPC's health halfway. He'd buy me the season pass. I took him up on that challenge, and I did it, but only after 4.5 hours of grinding the same very basic combo by the starter character. It was a slog, and it was not very fun, and while I loved rocking out to the soundtrack because the soundtrack in this game is absolutely worth every single penny of this game's purchase, it was really difficult for me to get into any of these characters because actually executing anything in this was very difficult for me. And adding accessibility options to a game is never going to decrease the value of a game to anyone. Except for maybe those Evo purists who, I guess, are scared of having more competition in a game they love, and are not confident enough in their own abilities to actually try and fight more people on the same playing field. I don't know. But the point is, if I can't play this game terribly well as much as I love it, I can't really recommend it all that heavily. My second big issue with Guilty Gear Strive is they put my main in Guilty Gear as a DLC character, and that frustrates me to no end. This is part of the reason why I wanted the season pass so bad, but when I finally did get my main through that season pass, I went from not being able to clear the basic arcade mode to actually slapping around the boss of the arcade mode pretty easily. Turns out when you get a character you can actually use that has somewhat easier controls, you actually enjoy yourself and you can actually play the game better, and it's a lot more fun and you feel better about yourself. Unfortunately, they didn't do that, and to put a long-standing member of the cast as DLC is just a faux pas in my book. I think it was the Tekken producer at one point said that, you can't do that. You can't parcel out characters in a fighting game to DLC because it's like taking away chess pieces and selling them back to the players. You're effectively making your entire player base play completely different games with each other because they have different tool sets. And I completely agree, more so because it's an existing character that other people have gotten used to and might really enjoy, like myself, versus, say, a new character that's going to be completely brand new. That's a little bit different, but, making established characters into DLC is just a no-go in my book. These 2 reasons are why I can't give Strive a place on my top 10 list, as much as I really desperately want to, because it's beautiful and it sounds great, and it's just an amazing fighting game. Honorable mention number B goes to Shin Megami Tensei 5. Or V, I guess, if you can't read Roman numerals. This is a game I found out about because I was looking on a Pokemon Arceus forum for better alternatives to Arceus because that game is not very good. And this completely knocks it out of the water. First of all, it is an absolutely beautiful game. It is dark, it is atmospheric, part and parcel for pretty much any Shin Megami Tensei game, except for it being beautiful because, let's be honest, I played Soul Hackers 2 this year, and that game is, no. but it is a great open world creature collector with multiple different routes of stories that you can go through, a really engaging environment, and a game that I loved playing. This is a game I want to play more and more of because honestly, I just cannot get enough of Shin Megami Tensei 5. This is what I expect from this series. You know, not effectively a very bog standard RPG made from the leftovers of the budget of a Persona game. Soul Hackers 2. And of course, honorable mention number C goes to Kirby and the Forgotten Worlds. This was a huge redemption story for me because Star Allies, the previous game, was abysmal. Pretty sure I gave it a poop list nomination many years ago because it just was not a very fun game. This game, however, is amazing. I would say it's a great companion piece to one of my favorite Mario games of all time, Super Mario 3D World, where every area feels completely different with its own gimmicks and mechanics, and it feels like a huge expansive world that there's just so much to see and do and unlock. There's so many different power-ups, and I just genuinely love this. The fact is, I was really worried that this game would be not very good compared to, you know, the previous one, because the previous one was just awful. But I will say Kirby and the Forgotten Lands is definitely one to pick up for on your Switch, especially, again, if you're looking for a good Kirby game, or you really liked Super Mario 3D World, because they kind of have a similar feel in terms of world design and individual stage design. And I think that this one is just, in general, an absolute gem on the Switch. Kicking off the list proper, we have number 10, a Sega Genesis game I picked up known as Herzog 2. And what little German I know would tell me that's Duke 2. This is one of the most interesting Genesis titles I've ever played, and I was absolutely astounded that I got to get a copy of this because the fact is my Genesis collection is like not even 15 titles long at this point. This is a very hard to find game and a ton of fun, and if you have a Switch you can actually get a downloadable version for about $5 I think, and that version is probably the one you should play because as I understand it actually explains stuff, because this Genesis version, it don't. This is a very strange game. It is sort of an omnidirectional shmup mixed with a RTS of sorts. You fly around as this ship, picking up different units that you've individually programmed to try and take over bases, guard locations, and just assault your opponents, while at the same time try to take out your opponent's defenses and your opponent, hopefully preventing them from taking out your team. If you get the Genesis version and you don't have a manual, this is going to be very, very complicated, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna make this game look good at all because it is, It's one you gotta spend some time with for sure, but it is a very unique game and definitely one of the coolest Genesis games I've played, certainly one of the most ambitious, and I have to say that this is a must-have for pretty much any Genesis owner out there, and an absolutely killer soundtrack. Also, mental note, get the soundtrack to this game because man is it good. But Herzog 2, if you can't get it on the Genesis, seriously get it on the Switch. I've heard it actually explains how to play the game, which is useful, but the fact is, if you like strategy, if you like shmups, or if you like something a little bit different, this one is one you have to track down because it is really remarkable, and probably one of my favorite Genesis games. Number 9 on our list, we're gonna do something a little different. See, there was actually about 3 different games in the exact same genre I wanted to nominate here because I loves me my Pokemon games. But I can only award the Game of the Year title to one of them. So, what I'm going to do is go through the previous 2, explain what's good about them, explain what the problems are, and then you can take that as a sort of soft recommendation before I get to the best one of these. The first nomination for number 9 is Pokemon Violet. This is probably the first Pokemon game that wasn't a weird photography thing that I was interested in since Ruby? Like, seriously, there just haven't been all that many exciting, you know, authentic first-party Pokemon games. But this one was actually genuinely quite cool. It's an open world that's actually an open world Pokemon Arceus that allows you to explore things at your own leisure. They give you multiple different goals, such as fighting a team that's absolutely not evil but just has no fashion sense, to hunting random herbs to make a sandwich, as well as hunting gyms. And, you know, they even say this is a game about finding your own treasure and going on your own adventures. So I took them up on that, and it was a lot of fun for the most part. I really do love the Pokemon designs. I often found myself making Sophie's choice as to what monsters I wanted on my team because, let's be honest, the little Fire Power Ranger guy that turns into not one but 2 different knights is awesome. The little peacock flamenco dancer is amazing. I don't like the little orange football, but his little flamey canary friend is kind of cute. And of course, the little vegetable cat that turns into a freaking phantom thief magician. I definitely picked the best starter. And, I mean, they have what is effectively Mawile 2.0. And I love Mawile. I mean, this one's not as good as actual Mawile, but I love Mawile. And hey, they made a robot Gallade. Gallade's one of my favorite monsters of all time, and you just made him better by making him a robot. How cool is that? Yeah, this game is amazing, except that there's two big issues. The first is that as much as this game wants to tout that it's about open world exploration and letting you have your own adventure, that's all a facade. It is. Because this game hangs on to so many ancient ideas from the older Pokemon games that completely clash with that idea of having your own open world adventure. Let me explain. I was running around this entire island. I decided I didn't want to do any of the goals. I just wanted to circle the island and find the coolest team, and once I assembled it, I was gonna go have that adventure. I ended up about halfway through on top of a mountain surrounded by monsters level 59, and I had managed to catch some, but they wouldn't listen to me in a fight, nor would the monsters I had trained up. See, they decided to keep the ancient archaic badge obedience mechanics for some reason. If you're not familiar, if you don't have any gym badges, no Pokemon will listen to you unless they're level 20 or under, which means 80% of the game I couldn't use any of the monsters I ran into. I was very, very adamant in following my own goals and finding my own treasure, as this game likes to tell you, so I went out of my way and bred every single monster I caught and retrained them from level 1 so they would listen to me. And then I traded them to a friend so that they could fill out their Pokedex a little. Except that the game, in spite of it still having them register as my monsters, kind of forgot they were mine, and now they don't listen to me anymore, and now I'm stuck at level 1 at the start of the game, except that I don't even have a starter monster, and I've already beaten all the trainers. I'm back at basically square -12 at this point. All because I decided I didn't want to do the whole beat gyms and get badges thing, which you shouldn't have to if this is all about finding your own adventure. They like to say it's about finding your own adventure, but it's really not. It's absolutely about having the exact same bog standard Pokemon adventure. And it's really just because they're adhering to old vestigial mechanics at this point that really shouldn't be there, especially considering that Pokemon Arceus kind of threw away that whole thing, and I mean, it threw away important things too that it probably shouldn't have. But at least being able to use monsters above a certain level because you haven't done X amount of progress, that's just dumb. And unfortunately, it's kind of completely destroyed this game being an open world and cracked that facade wide open for me. Problem number B is performance. Monsters will teleport in on top of you because they didn't spawn in fast enough. Animations will basically get cut in half if you're more than 10 feet away from anything. This game runs awful on this thing. It crashes frequently, and every time I open my phone in real life, I see like a news article about how, you know, everyone's boycotting and returning this game because it's broken and it doesn't work right. And then like the next article will say, no one's doing that, that's just a hoax. But I can tell you, this game does not run well. In spite of that though, I still had a lot of fun with this game, and I'm still going to play more of this, even though I basically have to start from less than nothing somehow. So my second potential nomination that isn't going to get this spot is a game called Monster Crown. This was a game I was very, very excited for. It sort of touted itself as being a more adult Pokemon with darker themes and concepts that you'd have to encounter, as well as, and maybe this is me misinterpreting the marketing, but the ability to fuse monsters to create basically unlimited possibilities. Again, maybe I misinterpreted that marketing, but what that actually means is that there's like 6 variations of every monster based on the monster's breed and its disposition, which are dictated by what 2 parents it has. The only extent that you get from any real like expansion upon that is based entirely around the individual palettes that you have, because you can borrow any other monster's palettes. But there aren't like unlimited possibilities for every monster. There's like 6 of everything, and that's a lot less interesting to me. But I was willing to accept that. What's a little bit harder to accept though, and this is me being as diplomatic as possible, is it was a buggy piece of crap, both at launch and now. This game would crash every 15 minutes, and bear in mind it took about 1.5 minutes to get in every single time it crashed, and the menus just flat out didn't work. The biggest mechanic of this game is breeding your monsters, and you couldn't even go and breed your monsters without the game crashing when you entered the menu screen to do that. Now fortunately, they have fixed some of that, but the menus are still pretty wonky and janky, and even now like the genetic manipulation screen of breeding is still really, really broken, and it's been out for like a year now. It's a shame too, because I really want to acknowledge this game, but it is a very, very broken game. Otherwise, it is an absolute blast to play. But if you're going to get this, I would suggest getting it on sale, or wait for a few hundred more fixes before you get it. But it is a game I do want to recommend because I do think it's good. But of course, now we get to like actual number 9, which is Goromon. Look, okay, this game was good, it worked, and it had great presentation. It was pretty much all the things the previous 2 weren't. That's all I really need to say. That said, like Monster Crown, it has a lot of options from the start, including activating a randomizer mode from the jump. If I recall, it had a mode that it allows you to capture your opponent's monsters, so if a trainer you run into has a shiny, you can just take it. That's a really novel idea. And it just felt like a really, really fun time. There was lots of really unique ways of evolving your monsters. I remember I had this little worm that got really, really mad, and if you made him mad like 10 times in one fight, he turned to this big angry wasp. And like there was this wolf that had a moon behind it, and if you howled at the moon and you had another one that did that at the same time, they'd evolve early. There was a lot of really cool secret stuff about this game and a ton of polish. And every route in this game, I was making Sophie's choice as to what monster I wanted to use. Like, there were so many monsters that I just wanted to try everything, and that's the sign of brilliant creature design and a really, really good creature collecting RPG. Now, I do have 2 big issues with this. The first one is, I just want more of this. Like, this game felt very, very short for what it is. Give me more. Give me a sequel right now, because this game, it scratched that itch, but I needed to scratch more and harder. But the second thing is that there are some boss monsters around and you can't catch them. And it's a shame because I think the boss monsters were really, really cool and I want to catch them. But yeah, I would suggest Pokemon Violet as well as Monster Crown, but if you can only have one creature collecting RPG that I played this year, absolutely make it Coromon because it is a lot of fun. And it has cross saves between the Steam and Switch versions. So you still have to buy both, which, I mean, I wish that wasn't the case, but you know. Either way, Coromon gets my number 9 spot on my Game of the Year list. Number 8 should come to absolutely no surprise to anyone who has been a fan of the show for a long time, because this little sub-series of a greater series is currently 4 for 4. I'm of course talking about Xenoblade Chronicles 3. They made another one, and I still really, really need to get a copy of Xenogears. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is just continuing the trend of things I liked in Xenoblade. It's a huge RPG with likable characters, a deep story, and just lots to do. It's basically a single-player MMO, and that's great. There's not really a lot I can complain about. I think most of the cast are pretty likable. 1 or 2 of the main cast I find to be a little bit dry. Taion just kind of came across as a little bland for me, but the rest of the main cast were pretty cool. I love the character customization. There is a lot of different classes to play in this game, which can vary up your style, and lots of things to do as those characters. However, I think it's important to be measured in this and show both sides of the coin, and there are some things I dislike about it. First and foremost, I don't really think it's all that clear how characters learn classes from other classes. Like, when you get a class, it's applicable to one of your characters, and then after a while, nebulously, one of your other characters will be able to play as that character once the character who had that class had it used long enough, I guess. But there's not really anything explained in-game what exactly causes this, or how to measure it, or really, you know, how to know when you're going to unlock a new class with one of the other characters who don't natively have that ability. So it just felt a little bit confusing to me, but it wasn't a huge deal because, I mean, there was a lot of other classes I could play as and level up. So that was fine, but a little bit of clarity there would be nice. The second issue I have with Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is the same issue I have with every Xenoblade game, which is auto-attacking RPGs are boring. Like, I'm sorry, but I like the idea of a single-player MMO, but taking the combat from MMO is the worst thing you can do, and yeah, it's still boring here. Can we add some, like, action elements so that I can actually, like, vary up my character's evasion to dodge attacks, or block, or, like, input actual attacks, as opposed to just standing around watching my character swing their sword until they have a move unlocked that I can trigger. I just want a sense of agency in my character's own survival and combat. Like, literally every other game outside of MMOs that has a combat system gives you agency in your own combat. Auto-attack systems are always boring and bad. Please, for the next one, give me some active inputs. That's all I want. Well, not all I want, but it's a good start to making your series significantly better. And I'm surprised this series has lasted this long with this combat style and hasn't changed it up or died off, because it's not fun. For everything great about this game, this is not a fun mechanic, and it never has been, and I don't know why it is here. Finally, and I said this about Xenoblade Chronicles 2, you know, Xenoblade Cross had customizable mechs. Does this game have customizable mechs? No? Well, better luck next time. You're not as good as Xenoblade Cross. And I will still say that. That is still the best one in the series, and it's the only one not on the Switch. Great. Just bring back the scales, come on! They were awesome, and there were so many parts, and you could customize them, and they were great. Seriously! Number 7 on my list is a game I got for my birthday. This is Inscription. I have to make something perfectly clear. If I haven't said it before, I'll say it now. I don't really like card games at all. I find them terribly, terribly boring. So let me tell you this. If there was a physical version of Inscription, I would buy that card game because I had a lot of fun playing the game Inscription. It is a card game horror mashup, but it's not like the spooky jump scare. Everyone else has done this sort of horror in the past 10 years and it's boring and I hate it. No, it's actually like atmospheric horror and a little bit of like psychological horror. It's very good, and there's like no jump scares at all. It's just really, really thick, depressing atmosphere that just crushes you down. And I am about all of that. Seriously, that is the perfect kind of horror for me. And the actual card game is genuinely quite cool, and as you play the game and go through the various chapters, it actually evolves and changes. Now, Inscription is not perfect. There are a few issues I have with it. First and foremost, while I do like that the mechanics do evolve over time, by the end of the final chapter, it feels like there's just a little bit too much, and a lot of the stuff in the final chapter feels entirely vestigial and could be cut. The second issue is it feels like structurally, from little snippets of gameplay you get basically in the epilogue, that this game probably should have had 2 more chapters. Because, again, they show off wholly unused otherwise mechanics in the epilogue for basically 2 more chapters, and basically wholly different ways to play the game. It's not just so much that they added different things as they did completely change the game and change the way you approach it, and that was interesting, but you only get to experience each of those for about 30 seconds, and when you've been playing the effectively same game over and over, and the last chapter, you know, at the last 10 minutes, bogged it down with a bunch of other nonsense that really felt like it slowed it down and made it way too confusing to play. A breath of fresh air of starting from zero and playing the game completely differently, that was a whole different thing, you know? But also, the story doesn't conclude so much as it just sort of stops. It tries to do a sort of meta story about, you know, a guy playing this game and his whole thing, and he's a very likable character. All the characters in this are really great characters. And they try and go about how this is a cursed game, but they don't really ever explain anything, nor does the story ever conclude so much as it just sort of gets cut off. Like, I don't know, maybe they just had to finish the game by a set period and had to cut a bunch of extra chapters or anything, but it feels like the story is unfinished, and it's a little underwhelming in that regard, which is a shame because everything else about the storytelling in Inscription is quite good, and it's an amazing card game. If you want a fun, atmospheric horror that has a genuinely solid card game, check out Inscription, and also get the Ouroboros. That thing is nuts. Number 6 on our list. This is where things get hard because I gotta admit, I'm literally deciding the order as I'm saying this now because, seriously, up to this point, I haven't really known. I've been sitting here trying to figure out which ones I want where, and honestly, these are all games that need to be in number 1. But number 6, I'm giving to Elden Ring, a game that everyone likes to describe as Breath of the Wild, but, so if I may just take the lazy route for just a moment, it's Breath of the Wild, but an actually good game. This is basically a Souls-style game made by the Souls-style people, but it's in a giant open world that actually has stuff to do. And it's very, very deep. There's tons of different plot lines you can follow, and it's left up to you to actually figure out where they are and what you have to do to get there. There's very little actual hand-holding with how this is structured for a big open world game, and I actually really appreciate that. And because of that, it really did remind me of my first time playing Dark Souls. You know, I'm in this huge interconnected open world. I have no idea where I'm going, but let's go and figure it out. It was exciting, it was thrilling, and I was writing my own story. The way this was structured was really well done, and the fact that there's a constant feed of content no matter what direction you go into You know, it feels like you're always going on an ever-evolving adventure, even though, you know, some plot lines and some side quests felt like unfinished, which was a bit unfortunate. But the thing that really stuck with me was two of the most absolutely Dark Souls moments I have ever seen. And when I see moments like these in a Dark Souls style game, that's how I know I'm having a good time. The first one was when I was in the first big castle of the game. You know, you get to a point where you've done this checkpoint so many times and you're just annoyed, so you start ignoring all the enemies running past them. And one run when you do that, the enemies don't have any of it and they all start trying to dogpile you, so you run as far and as fast as you can without any real thought, and you're entirely just reacting to your environment until you realize the enemies have stopped chasing you and you have no idea where you are. Yeah, I was running around on some rooftops at one point. I ended up in this weird room covered in fog doors and like little gargoyle statues that had a weapon in it. I had no idea where I was or how I got there. All I knew is I had, for a moment, just a pure moment of just straight up adrenaline, sitting here just trying not to die as I was trying to get back to a boss I had died to way too many times. That is an absolute classic Dark Souls moment. The other Dark Souls moment I felt that made me really, really happy with this game was eventually I gave up trying to fight that boss of that castle, which is not mandatory, but it's kind of structured like it is. And I went back to sort of the opening starting area to look around because I hadn't gotten any new weapons, and I found this little ruin that had a chest in it. Well, I opened that chest and got hit by a sleep bomb that somehow teleported me to a horrible crystal cavern filled with miners that would one-shot me. When I managed to get out of there, I found myself in a horrible blood lake. And at the center of this lake was this giant gold knight who would one-shot me. So I sat there, fighting at the corner of his arena, not quite in his arena, taking pot shots at him with a bow for 2 hours until I killed him. At level 1, because I could not find any way to level at this point. I had the most basic starting equipment, I hadn't found a weapon I liked, I was just trying to outsmart my opponent by figuring out exactly the rules they had to play and trying to break them. You have to understand, that is exactly how I fought the Tower Knight the first time I ever played Demon Souls. This was such a weirdly nostalgic moment for me that otherwise would probably seem like a total waste of time and why would you tell this story, but it meant so much to me because it's just, that's a Souls game to me, you know? It's wandering around not knowing where you are, what you're doing, but you see something and you see a challenge and you're gonna either try and fight it straight up or try and find a way to think around it. And even if it takes forever, you're gonna do it because you're that determined. That's a Souls game, and this game nailed it. I quite love Elden Ring, and I'm honestly kinda sad it's only in the 6th position, but like I said, this is like the 10 top ones, so you know, maybe play this game. It's very, very good. And it did show me that I could have actually enjoyed Breath of the Wild if there was actually stuff to do in it, and your weapon didn't break every 2 seconds, and there were dungeons, and there was actually a quality to the game. But alas, it's not Elden Ring. This is Elden Ring, and it's good. Number 5 on our list was an absolute phenomenon this year that came out of nowhere, and I love it. We are talking about Vampire Survivors, a game by Ponkel. Ponkel did a good thing when they made this game, because they made a game, and get this, they sold you the game. They didn't parcel off bits for DLC, although there is one DLC level, it's huge and it's super cheap now. They didn't, you know, fill it with NFTs, although there is one NFT, but not the kind you're thinking of. It's more the one that melts the faces off enemies, and it's pretty cool. There's no microtransactions. There's no horrible gambling nonsense. In fact, this entire game is kind of structured like all the horrible things that slot machines do to, you know, make people addicted and ruin their lives, and actually point it in the direction of a good single-player experience. All over the place, there's bright lights, flashing colors, it makes you feel excited, there's tons of weapons, they upgrade as you go. When I started this game, I wasn't entirely sold on it, let me tell you. Because the fact is, I didn't like the fact that, again, like Xenoblade, it was an auto-attacking game where I felt like I had no direct agency over my character, and to be fair, I think having direct control would make this game a lot more challenging, but it might not necessarily work for the structure either. And yet, you have to understand, if I've played more than 2 hours of a game on Steam, it's done something right. I think I have like 117 hours, and this is like my 3rd most played Steam game. This game is amazing. There's like 45 different characters, an incredible number of secrets that are like references to older gaming stuff, like shoutouts to Toasty being awesome once you get her to like level 200. But she's a total challenge character. Shoutouts to Actual Challenge. a game that's ever evolving. This reminds me a lot of Binding of Isaac, which is, you know, it was a game where you play it, and every time you play, you might not win, you might not lose, but every time you do, you get a little further in the grander progression of the game. You unlock more items. It's a lot like that. Learning how to evolve your items and get new synergies between different items, unlocking new characters by finding them in the world, as well as, you know, finding out all the tricks with all these characters and how to upgrade them further, finding out all these different stages and all the little, like, just secret stuff. This game is huge for a game that, at least when I bought it, cost like $2. And I mean, this game was so cheap that at the time, were it not for Steam's weird inability to gift things to people in other regions, I would have bought a copy of this for everyone on my Discord. Just because I could afford it, and because everyone needs to play this, and because it is that affordable. The fact is, Vampire Survivor is really the pinnacle of what I want gaming to be. I want it to be accessible, I want it to be affordable, and I want it to be engaging and a lot of fun. And it lacks any sense of blind greed or cynicism that, you know, permeates pretty much the entirety of the games industry today. Or any sort of psychological manipulation by the developers to, you know, fleece more money out of their players. I just want games to be about fun. And I mean, it's bizarre to say that out loud because it sounds like such a basic, obvious thing, but if you really look at how gaming has evolved since I was a child, it's really become significantly less about that, and that's genuinely terrifying to me. This is just a good, pure experience. It's probably the gamiest game I have played in a very long time, and I am genuinely impressed by how pure an experience this is. No, not everything about it really suits my taste. Again, I can't stand auto-attacking, but you know, everything else about this game is amazing. And the fact is, it avoids pretty much every terrible thing modern gaming is known for nowadays, and does nothing but dunk on every single modern game that takes up those practices by being a better quality experience. Seriously, the only thing I would say about this that did something wrong or disingenuous on Ponkel's part would be, we still haven't exactly found the vampire yet now, have we? Maybe I was the vampire all along. Plot twist! Number 4 on our list is honestly something I would like to put a lot higher, but I honestly was debating whether I should even include it on this list because it's not a game that was new to me this year. It was a game I played a long time ago when I was a kid and actually influenced my life greatly, and if I'm being honest, I never thought I'd ever actually own a copy of. I'm of course talking about Shining Force 2! Yeah! This is the sequel to the legendary Shining Force. When I was a kid, I rented the original, this game, as well as watched Gundam Wing all in one day, and that was my collective introduction to anime. Something that has influenced my life basically every day since, so it's kind of an important game to me. But if you've never heard of Shining Force, let me spin you a tale. Take the guys who made, you know, the Mario Golf games, or, you know, more importantly to me, Golden Sun, and then have them take a swing at Fire Emblem, but make it on the Genesis and make it available for the West. And, you know, not for limited time, only for a download title. What is wrong with you, Nintendo? Oh yeah, and the game stars David Bowie, going from swordsman to hero to save the world while building up a team of friends and compatriots to fight the forces of darkness. This game is awesome. It's a fantastic strategy RPG, and if you have any interest in strategy RPGs, this one is, I think, kind of a must play. The original one was pretty good, but let's be honest, 2 is where it's really at, I think. And if you really are into strategy RPGs, I think you'd be doing yourself a serious disservice to not own a copy of Shining Force 2 in some capacity. Unfortunately, physical Genesis copies cost an awful lot of money, so I was really lucky to find this in a random cabinet at a wargaming shop for an actual affordable price. Especially, again, because my Genesis collection is like less than 15 games. To have a gem like this in it is huge for me. But this one was, again, my intro to anime, and it is anime AF. It is an incredible experience, and if you like strategy RPGs, I'm gonna keep saying that because my brain is on repeat. I want to say so many things about this game, it's that good. And yet I'm having trouble formulating the words because I'm so excited about Shining Force 2. This is one of those games I've been playing a lot, like just before bed, because it's a lot of fun to get a couple turns in, advance the story a little bit, and, you know, get some more levels in, you know, evolve my characters, have them change their classes. If I remember correctly, Battle Monk is kind of OP, and, you know, it's just a great story with some fantastic characters in a very whimsical world with a lot of different races that all have different roles and characters. You know, it feels like a very expansive world which is not what the original Shining Soul was that I played earlier this year, which felt like the antithesis of all of that. But I actually played Shining Soul 2, and that was much better, but let's be completely honest. If you want a Shining game, get Shining Force 2. Or maybe Shining Force 3, I don't know, I never played it. It was on the Saturn, and it was rare, and we only got a third of it. But Shining Force 2 is really, really, really good, so do yourself a favor and play it. Number 3 on this list is a game I had wanted to play for a very, very long time. I remember it originally launching on the PSP out here in the West, and it became a must-have title at launch for me, and I never found a copy. So I'm super thankful Vermilion sent me a copy on Steam. This is Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky. This is the second Legend of Heroes game I have played, and it's the second one that's made this list, and for pretty much the exact same reasons. It is a ridiculously fun RPG. It has an insane world. Like, all the NPCs are named and actually have life stories. If you encounter them several times in a chapter, they'll have moved and have different things going on in their lives, and you can talk to them about it. The combat's actually pretty deep for what it is, and seriously, the soundtrack is amazing. Who thought lounge jazz was a good idea for a combat theme? Because I want to shake their hand. That is brilliant! This game is really quite cool, and I want to play all the others on Steam. It's a shame they don't go on sale for that much off, but that seems to be a continuous theme with Nihon Falcom's digital titles. Either way, this game is ridiculous. For a company that has relatively very non-existent budgets, they punch well above their weight class, and this is really the pinnacle of world building in RPGs, I think. I think every RPG out there needs to take a page from Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky. And I want to play the rest of this series because I gotta say, they are a huge time commitment, and if you played them back to back, they would probably wear you down pretty quick like the Yakuza games would, but they are an absolute treat to play, and if you love RPGs, look no further than Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky. It is a very special experience, and that ending, man, I really gotta play the sequel. It's so good. Number 2 on our list. I'm actually looking at the physical list I wrote down, and there's like a little curvy arrow with arrows pointing to 1 and 2, because I genuinely don't know which I want to put first. As much as everything on this list I want to be number 1, these two, even to this day, I cannot tell you which one I want in first or second, so let's call them both number 1. So number 1A, we have Paradise Killer. Sly Boots hooked me up with this, and this was a game I remember coming out on the Switch and really wanting to play, but it was really pricey. Again, I don't make a lot of money. Feel free to hit up the Patreon to change that so I can afford nice things, because I'd like nice things. But Paradise Killer is an amazing thing. It is a detective first-person style game where you play as the investigation freak, Lady Love Dies. Also, she's an absolute style queen, and if they ever release a replica of her jacket, I want it. I don't even care if it comes with the dress, I will wear that. I think I've got the legs to pull it off. But either way, this is an amazing game about style. It was once pitched to me as JoJo meets Cthulhu meets Ace Attorney, and that's kind of what it is, except let's remove Ace Attorney from that because those are like visual novel things and I hate them. See, that's the thing that makes this game so special to me, is it's a beautiful neon vaporwave aesthetic of a game that's wrapped in a murder mystery, and you have to solve it. But unlike a visual novel where you'd have to just click on X number of things on a screen to advance the plot, and then basically answer a quiz at the end to make sure you were paying attention, because all visual novels are basically just reading with extra steps and a threat of punishment, this one, you have to move in three-dimensional space of your own volition and look for clues yourself. You have to look in unexpected places to find things, and you have to actually be a part of these scenes and investigations. You have to physically move around objects in three-dimensional space to see where something might be that you wouldn't otherwise be able to see from a 2D image. You have to move and platform around in this environment to take a look at things. And seriously, you want to take a look at everything, whether it's related to murder or not, because this world is beautiful, it is colorful, it is very dreamlike and surreal and psychedelic, and I love that sort of visual aesthetic that is absolutely 100% me. Everything in this world is freaky, and there's like this creepy overbearingness about like how culty this world is, and it's a world that's basically empty, and all the characters are basically 2D cardboard cutouts you have to go and talk to. So it's not like there's really anything out there that's like out to get you or anything, but the empty streets feel genuinely creepy, and like around every corner there's something that might be there to get that you just, it's peering just beyond the veil, and you can't quite make it out, but you know it's there and it will get you. if not physically, at least psychologically. The tone of this game, it honestly, as bright and colorful as it is, it's incredibly creepy, and it kind of crushes you under its creepiness, and that's the kind of horror I love, and this isn't even a horror game. Well, not up front anyway. This game is amazing for about 1,000,001 reasons, but it created a detective-style game that actually played like a game and not like a book, and that was 1,000,000 times more engaging for me, and it's beautiful, and it's really a one-of-a-kind kind of game. And you know, the only thing I really dislike about this, aside from the audio mixing on one character being really, really harsh, is that it's a one-and-done kind of experience. There's a mechanic where as long as you can back up whatever claims you have at the end with whatever proof you have, you know, it'll work out, so you can modify the ending of the story any way you want, really. But once you've seen everything in the game, you get a pretty good idea of what's happened solidly, and, you know, once you've done that, you've experienced the game. This is the kind of game where I kind of wish that I could forget ever playing it just so I could experience it again for the first time, because nothing is ever going to be quite like it was the first time. This game is really that special. I think that everyone who likes a good mystery, who likes solving puzzles, who likes investigation, who just wants to see a very weird, beautiful world that's really quite creepy when you think about it, you know, check out Paradise Killer, because this is absolutely one of the coolest games I've played this year. Definitely number one on my list, except now we also have number one on my list because I wasn't able to decide between these two, so I'm calling them both number one. And this is going to an entire series that I experienced this year. That is, of course, Spark the Electric Jester. Now, if I've never said this before, I'll say it again. I'm someone on the spectrum, and for me, part of that is being very emotionally muted, I guess would be the best way to put it. I've never been greatly in touch with my own feelings about things, and it's always been hard for me to grasp my own feelings about things, outside of a constant feeling of like loneliness, sadness, and depression. And when I play any of the Spark games, they elicit such a joyful reaction in me. Like whenever I play any one of these games, I have the biggest grin on my face, and I am just genuinely joyous playing these. Like, it is just so viscerally enjoyable for me to just maneuver my way around these environments and use the physics and built-in mechanics to find the perfect lines to get around stuff, and skip fighting enemies and just find the perfect ways to maneuver around the environments. It is really hard to explain, other than it is just a very deep feeling that is, you know, something I don't feel terribly often in life. And this is part of the reason why I really wanted to put this at number one, because it just does something so special to me, and it just makes me feel something so deeply, and it is just a genuinely really fun experience. This game has like such an emotional impact on me just because of how mechanically fun these games are. These are the Sonic games that we all kind of wanted after Sonic Adventure 2 and never got, because Sega's too happy to cram werehogs in things, because they didn't get that the were from werewolf actually means human, so a werehog is actually a human that turns into a pig. They really should have gone with hedgewolf. But the fact is, Sega keeps cramming like gimmicks and half completing their games and saying that's good enough, and it's not. The fact is, Sonic fans are really not that hard to please. They want solid, well-made, well-polished platforming, and they want to move at a decent clip, and that's it. If you got that, you've done good. Fact is, Sega can't do any of those. But a small one-person developer made a trilogy of amazing games. Each of these games in the Spark series is different, and, well, none of them are perfect. The first game's got some wonky hitboxes and some glitchiness. The second one's controls are a little bit too touchy. And the third one kind of removed all the transformations except one. I get why they did it, because it was hard to justify all the different transformations in a meaningful way, but at the same time, transformations are such a huge part of this game that when they did, that kind of hurt. Also, they added fall damage, which, well, they kind of built the game around. They also released the second game's levels in this game, and those are significantly harder to play because of it. Like, one level's almost impossible because of the fall damage that will actually kill you. While none of these games are perfect, they are effectively better Sonic games than anything Sega's put out, with the exception, of course, of Sonic Mania, which, as I will always point out, was basically a fan game that Sega slapped their brand on. But what we have are three excellent, distinct experiences. The first game is effectively Sonic Advance meets Kirby. The second and third games are basically Sonic Adventure 2 meets Devil May Cry, and yeah, it's as awesome as that sounds. The fact is, Spark the Electric Jester is a game based in the love for a series that has been really tarnished by the people who own the rights to it. VPird Games could not make a Sonic game, so they made Sonic Yellow, and they made it better than Sonic. Heck, the third game even has a level that is basically just technical flex after technical flex after technical flex by the developer. Sonic can't even have stuff like actually be permanent in its world and has massive pop-in from what I've seen. Yeah, this actually has like little tiny monitors in a tunnel that'll actually show you the RGB lights that composite the main colors of the tunnel. There is so much here that just shows that the developers were just flexing on what Sonic is, with basically no budget comparatively. The fact is, Spark the Electric Jester is amazing, and everyone needs to play it. The games are not perfect, but they are some of the most fun I've had on my Steam account. And I really want everyone to play this series because they are just genuinely that good, that they made me feel unbridled joy from the bottom of my heart, you know. And that's coming from someone who is usually very monotonous about his feelings or just generally feels depressed. You know, this game was a big firework in my heart of happiness, so to speak. It was a very special game to me. And because of the nature of it being an arcade game, it's a lot more immediately replayable for a more engaging and different experience. Whereas Paradise Killer, again, once you know what happens, that's kind of your experience. But that said, Paradise Killer and Spark the Electric Jester, the entire series, are absolute must-owns if you have a Steam account. I think Spark 2 is now also on Xbox One, which is kind of cool as well. And, you know, Paradise Killer's on everything. I think it was on Game Pass for a while, so it was kind of sort of free. Basically, if you want some really unbelievably good games, make sure you pick up these two no matter what, because the fact is, Paradise Killer and the entire Spark the Electric Jester series is fantastic. And that has been my top, I mean, I want to say 10, but let's be honest, 16-ish, or rather my 16-ish top 1 games of 2022. There has been a lot of really good games this year. There was so many I had to cut from this list I really wanted to include here too. Like this year was so unbelievably good for games, and I really hope you check them all out. And I also want to know what your top 10 games of this year were, because the fact is, I can't play everything as much as I want to, so if I miss something cool, I want to know about it so I can play it later. I also hope that you'll stick around by subscribing to the show and see everything else I do, which is a lot of stuff. You might also want to check out and follow my Twitch channel to see me stream a whole bunch of stuff, as well as a few different Let's Plays I'm going to be doing. I'm just finishing up some stuff right now. I'm hoping in the new year to do at least 3 more. And if you really want to make my day, check out the show's PayPal or Patreon. Support the show any way you can so that I can continue to do what I do to the best of my abilities, which in this case is tell people about all these awesome games, especially because I don't make a lot of money doing this, and I really do need the support if I want to keep making awesome stuff and be able to afford more games to show off, the really cool ones to you people, and, you know, for the other list, the terrible ones that you should absolutely avoid. You know, this channel does mostly run on the support of fans, and any support I can get honestly means a lot to me. So I really do hope that you do. But either way, I hope you enjoyed this list, and I hope I will see you in the new year with more awesome and probably awful games. But until then, peace out, Internet.